My name is Layla, and for most of my life, I played the role of the quiet one, the invisible daughter, the compliant sister, the agreeable niece, but inside, I was screaming. Growing up, our family looked perfect on the outside: middle class, church on Sundays, matching Christmas pajamas. We had a big brick house with a neatly trimmed lawn and a golden retriever named Benny. My mother made sure we looked polished. My father made sure we stayed silent. I was the youngest of three. My brother Aaron was the golden child varsity sports, top of his class. Never wrong in my parents' eyes. My sister Grace was the charmer, funny, outgoing, the favorite in every room. And then there was me, or the observer, the one who noticed everything, but learned very young to say nothing. Because when I did speak up, I paid for it. My earliest memory of being punished for telling the truth was when I was 6. I told my mom that Dad had slapped me hard across the face for accidentally spilling his coffee on a folder. She looked at me with those cold eyes. Not sad, not shocked, just annoyed. "Don't lie about your father like that," she snapped. "You're just being dramatic." I wasn't. My cheek was red and puffy, but she walked away, muttering something about how sensitive I was. That day, I learned truth gets you nowhere in this house. I began to notice a pattern. Aaron could skip chores, scream at our mother, even sneak out and drink at parties, and somehow, he was always just being a teenager. Grace once totaled Mom's car at 17 while texting, and my parents bought her a new one within a week. But if I was 5 minutes late from school because I stayed to ask a teacher about homework, I got grounded for disrespecting their time. The favoritism was suffocating. But worse than the neglect was the gaslighting. Anytime I tried to say something was wrong, I was told I was too sensitive, imagining things, or trying to start drama. Even when Aaron held my wrist too tight and left bruises. Even when Dad slammed a door so hard it cracked the wall next to my head. Even when Grace locked me out of the house during a thunderstorm and laughed from the upstairs window. "You always exaggerate," they'd say. "Why can't you just be normal?" Normal. That word haunted me. I began to wonder if maybe I really was the problem. Maybe if I'd just tried harder, cleaned more, spoke less, smiled even when it hurt, maybe then they'd love me the way they loved each other. But no matter what I did, I was always the outsider. It wasn't just emotional. There were real consequences. I remember getting a C+ on a math quiz in 8th grade. My dad took my phone, my books, even my pillow. "You want to be lazy," he said. "Sleep on the floor until you learn respect." Meanwhile, Aaron had a string of D's on his report card, and my parents took him out to dinner to boost his confidence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break every plate in that perfect white kitchen. But I didn't, because anger wasn't allowed in our home. At least, not my anger. Only theirs. I stayed quiet. I journaled. I cried into my pillow every night. But I never told anyone. Not a teacher. Not a friend. Who would believe me? Everyone thought we were such a lovely family. Until college. Getting into college was the first sliver of freedom I'd ever known. I chose a university 5 states away, with a scholarship and a plan to disappear. My parents didn't seem too bothered. When I left, no teary goodbye, just a quick wave from the porch and a reminder to keep our family name respectable. But once I was gone, I unraveled. I started therapy in my sophomore year after suffering panic attacks. That left me breathless in lecture halls. My therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Ellen, asked me one question during our second session that cracked something open. "Did you feel safe as a child?" I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because no one had ever asked me that before. That night, I started writing everything down. Every memory, every slap, every scream, every silence. It poured out like poison I didn't know I had swallowed. I wrote for hours, days. And eventually, those pages became an essay for a creative nonfiction class. The prompt was simple: tell a story you've never told out loud. I titled mine, "The Family That Forgot Me." I changed the names, left out specific details that could identify them. But it was raw, unfiltered, real. I didn't expect what happened next. My professor loved it, so much so that she submitted it with my permission to a university anthology. It was published, not widely, just a campus collection. But somehow, it got back to my sister. I found out the way we find out everything now. A furious group text. "Grace, how dare you write that garbage about us? You think you're some kind of victim. You're disgusting. MOM, we raised you, fed you, gave you everything. And this is how you repay us. Aaron, wow. What a narcissist move. Go cry to your therapist some more. Dad, you're Not our daughter anymore. And just like that, they cut me off. No calls, no emails. I was blocked on everything. As if I had died. As if telling my truth was worse than all the things they had done to me. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I'd always felt like the outsider, but part of me still clung to hope. The hope that one day, they'd see me, hear me, maybe even apologize. But the silence that followed my story was louder than any scream. Even extended family joined the attack. My aunt called to scold me. Families aren't perfect, Layla. We don't air our dirty laundry in public. As if perfection was ever the point. What hurt the most was the betrayal of Grace. I always thought that as the only other daughter. Maybe one day she'd understand. Maybe she'd remember the time she caught Dad yelling in my face or the way Aaron twisted my arm behind my back for stealing the remote. But instead, she sided with them. She called me attention-seeking. Funny. I spent my whole childhood trying not to be seen, and now that I finally spoke up, they said I just wanted the spotlight. Let me be clear. I didn't write that essay for revenge. I wrote it because the weight of silence was killing me, but it didn't matter. In their eyes, I was the traitor, the liar, the selfish one who smeared the family's good name. I thought the truth would set me free. Instead, it left me completely alone. But in that loneliness, something surprising began to happen. My professor forwarded me an email from another student who read my piece. She wrote, "Thank you. Your story made me realize I wasn't crazy. I grew up just like this. And I thought I was the only one." Then another came in. And another. People began reaching out. Some from school, some strangers online. One girl said she read my story and finally got the courage to report her abusive stepfather. That's when I realized something powerful. My family could cut me off. They could deny what happened. They could erase my number, uninvite me from holidays, curse my name, but they couldn't silence me anymore. I had found my voice, and I wasn't giving it back. After the essay was published and the fallout hit like a tidal wave, I did what I always did when things got bad. I retreated. I skipped class for days, buried myself in blankets, and convinced myself that maybe I'd gone too far. That maybe I was the problem. But then I reread my own words. I looked at the bruised little girl I wrote about, the one no one believed, the one who flinched at raised voices and cried behind closed doors. And I knew I had never lied. I had just told the story no one else had the courage to tell still. There were moments when I missed them. I missed my mom's cinnamon rolls. I missed watching bad crime shows with Grace. I missed Aaron, weirdly, even though he'd been the cruelest, because in some twisted way, he was still my brother. But mostly, I missed the idea of a family. The dream I'd clung to for years that maybe one day they'd change. That if I just behaved, they'd finally see me as more than the scapegoat. That dream was gone now. A month after the blow-up, I got an unexpected message on Facebook from someone I hadn't spoken to since high school. It was my cousin Rachel. She had always been quiet. Like me, we used to sit together at family reunions and avoid the chaos. She never said much, but her eyes always seemed to understand. Her message was short. "Layla, I read your essay. I believe you." I remember some of it. I sat there staring at the screen. My hands were shaking. I replied, "You do?" She wrote back a few minutes later, "I saw things. Your dad screaming at you in the kitchen when you were 10. The time Aaron locked you in the garage. I thought about speaking up, but I didn't know what would happen to me if I did." I cried reading those words. It was the first time anyone from my family acknowledged it. The first time someone validated my reality without trying to fix it or deny it. We talked for hours that night. Rachel told me that even though she didn't live with us, she always felt the darkness when visiting. It was like walking into a house where everyone smiled too much and no one made eye contact. She said, "I wasn't crazy. That small connection gave me strength, and it opened a door I hadn't expected." More messages started trickling in. A former neighbor messaged me, "Your dad used to yell so loudly we could hear it across the street. I always wondered how you were doing." Babysitter from years ago. I didn't know what to do back then. I was just a teenager, but I always felt something was off. Even one of my high school teachers emailed, "I'm so sorry I didn't ask more questions. You were such a quiet student. I wish I'd paid closer attention." And then came the message that shattered everything. It was from my grandmother, the one person I thought would never take sides. I hadn't seen Grandma Joyce in years. She lived in Florida, and we were never especially close. She sent birthday cards, but was more of a figurehead in our lives than an active participant. Her message began like this: "Layla, I don't know if you'll read this, but I want you to know that I believe every word you wrote. And I need to tell you something I should have said a long time ago. She went on to describe a moment from my childhood I'd completely forgotten. When you were 7, you came to my house for a weekend. You barely spoke. I remember brushing your hair and noticing a bruise on your arm. I asked you what happened, and you said, Daddy was mad because I touched his papers. And then you said, but I'm not supposed to tell. My throat tightened. I should have done something, she wrote. But your father told me I was meddling, that you were making up stories for attention, and I let it go. I'm sorry, Layla. I failed you. I don't even know how to describe what that felt like. On one hand, it was like someone finally lit a match in the darkness, like I wasn't alone in remembering Dot, but on the other hand, it was too late. Too late to undo the years of silence, too late to rescue that little girl. I thanked her, of course. I told her I appreciated the message, but inside, a deeper anger was growing, because it wasn't just my parents who ignored the truth. It was everyone. Everyone who saw, suspected, felt but said nothing. They let me live in that hell, year after year. Alone. And now that I'd finally told the truth, they wanted to apologize quietly. In DMs, in private messages, no. No more silence. No more secrets. So I made a decision that would change everything. I recorded a video. It wasn't fancy, just me, sitting in front of my laptop, raw and nervous. But I spoke plainly. I started by reading an excerpt from my essay, the part where I described being punished for telling the truth. Then I looked into the camera and said, I was the invisible child, the family scapegoat, and when I finally spoke, they cut me out like a disease. But I'm done protecting their reputation. I won't let their silence be stronger than my truth. I ended the video with a message for others like me. If you grew up in a family that punished you for seeing too much, I see you. If they called you dramatic, crazy, ungrateful, I believe you. You are not alone. I posted it late at night, heart pounding, convinced I'd delete it by morning, but I didn't. Within a week, it had over 300,000 views. Comments flooded. And this is my story. You just described my childhood word for word. I never thought someone else knew what this felt like. Thank you for saying what I've never been brave enough to say. For the first time in my life, I felt powerful, not in a loud, flashy way, but in a quiet, grounded way. Like I had taken my broken pieces and built something unbreakable from them. But of course, power always comes at a cost. 3 weeks later, I got in a mail from Grace. I hesitated before opening it. My stomach twisted, expecting more rage, more accusations. But it wasn't what I expected at all. The subject line was, Are you happy now? Inside, she wrote, Mom hasn't stopped crying. Dad had to take time off work. Aaron is furious. You've embarrassed all of us. Was that your goal? I stared at those words, blinking. Embarrassed? As if their shame was my responsibility. She continued, You act like you were some victim. You always loved attention. Well, you got it. Congrats. I didn't respond. Not right away. But I drafted something. A reply I still haven't sent. It says, You never saw me, Grace. Not once. Not when I was crying. Not when I was hurting. You saw what you wanted to see, someone you could ignore because it made your life easier. I hope one day you understand that silence is not the same as peace. And pretending something didn't happen doesn't mean it didn't. I don't know if I'll ever send it, but writing it made me feel lighter. And then, the final twist came. Rachel, my cousin, called me one afternoon, crying. She told me she'd spoken to her mom, my Aunt Linda, about everything. She shared the essay, the video. And her mom believed her for the first time in our family's history. Someone stood up. Aunt Linda called my mom and confronted her. She demanded answers. She said the entire family needed to stop pretending. It didn't go over well, of course, apparently. My parents are now reviewing their relationships with extended family, whatever that means. But I smiled for the first time in weeks. Because the silence is cracking. One voice turned into 2, then 4, then thousands. And I realized maybe the family I was born into wasn't my real family at all. Maybe the people who listened, believed, supported this was my family now. And I would never go back to silence again. I thought that once I found my voice, the hardest part was over. But the truth is, telling your story is only half the battle. The real war begins when you try to live with the consequences. I had gone viral. People I didn't even know were reaching out to share their own trauma, their own scars. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a ghost, but with every comment of support. There were whispers too. Messages from people I'd grown up with, church friends, family acquaintances, Even old teachers. Some of them tried to stay neutral. I'm sure your parents meant well. Maybe they didn't know any better. All families have issues. But what they didn't understand is that abuse wrapped in tradition is still abuse. Manipulation delivered with a smile is still manipulation, and silence in the face of suffering is still complicity. Still. The pushback came hard and fast. Grace messaged me again. This time, her tone had changed. She asked to meet in person. At first, I refused. I didn't trust her. Not after the things she said, the way she had defended our parents like they were saints. But something in her message caught me off guard. She said, I need to talk to you before Mom and Dad rewrite the story completely. I think I need to tell you something. We met at a park, mid-afternoon, neutral ground. She looked tired, older somehow, like the truth had finally started weighing on her too. She barely said hello before diving in. I talked to Grandma, she said, eyes on the grass. She told me about what happened. When you were little, the bruises, the silence, all of it. I stayed quiet. Let her talk. I always thought you were exaggerating, she admitted. Mom and Dad, they told us you were just emotional, overdramatic. But I remember things too, Layla. I didn't want to believe them. Her voice cracked. I remember Dad slapping you once. I remember Aaron pinning you down and laughing while you cried. I remember Mom yelling at you so hard you threw up. She finally looked up at me. I'm sorry. I don't know how I ignored it for so long. And just like that, I felt everything and nothing at once. Relief, sadness, rage. You saw it, I said, my voice trembling. You were there, and you still let them make me the villain. I know, she whispered. I was a coward. I didn't hug her. I didn't yell at her either. I just nodded. I appreciate you telling me now, I said quietly. But I don't forgive you. Not yet. She didn't argue. We sat in silence for a while, and then she said something I'll never forget. Mom and Dad are planning to sue. My heart stopped. What? They say you defamed the family. That they say. The video, it's damaging. Aaron's worried it could affect his job. Dad's talking about getting a lawyer. I laughed. Bitter and hollow. They abused me for years, I said. And now they're mad that people know about it. Grace nodded. I told them not to do it, but you know Dad. He sees this as a betrayal. It was a betrayal, I snapped, of his lies. I went home that night and cried harder than I had in months. Not because I was afraid, but because I was exhausted. Tired of always being the one who had to fight, defend, prove. But then, I remembered something my therapist once told me. When people lose control of the narrative, they attack the truth teller. So I got a lawyer. Turns out, they didn't have a case. Everything I wrote was from my own perspective. I had changed names. I hadn't published any full names or photos. My lawyer told me. They're bluffing. They just want to scare you into silence. But I was done being scared. So I did something bold. I wrote a second essay. This time, I didn't just write about the abuse. I wrote about the aftermath, about being disowned, about family turning on victims, about the cost of truth. And this time, I used my real name. It was picked up by a major online platform. Thousands of shares. Even a few podcast invites. I declined most of them. I wasn't chasing fame. I just wanted to speak. But the more I spoke, the angrier my family became. That's when I got the letter. A certified envelope. Formal. Legal language. Not a lawsuit, but a disavowal. They had written me out of everything. Any inheritance. Any property. Even family communication. The letter said, you are no longer recognized as a member of this family. It was signed by my parents. Aaron had co-signed. Grace hadn't. And surprisingly, I felt free. Because the truth is, I had never been part of that family. Not really. I was a placeholder. A scapegoat. A shadow in their perfect little story. Now, I was out of the book entirely. I celebrated with cheap wine and a solo dance in my living room. But life has a funny way of circling back. A few weeks later, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. From my hometown. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. Is this Layla? An older voice asked. Yes, this is Mr. Kemper. I was your father's boss. I froze. He told me he had seen the video, and the essay, his daughter, had sent it to him. I had no idea what was going on in that house, he said. But after watching you speak, I believe you, and I want you to know something. He explained that my father had recently been passed over for a major promotion. That concerns had been raised about his temper, his leadership, his ability to handle pressure. Apparently, people had started talking, and my story had reached more corners than I knew. "I'm not saying this to gloat," he said, "but I think you should know you've made more of a difference than you realize." I hung up the phone in stunned silence. It wasn't revenge I had wanted, but there was something satisfying about knowing the truth had ripple effects. That maybe, just maybe, the system that protected my abusers was finally cracking. And then came the final surprise. Grandma Joyce died, peacefully in her sleep. She had been ill, and I hadn't known. I wasn't told until after the funeral. But what I was told was that she had left behind a letter from me, and a copy of her will. In it, she wrote, "You were the only one brave enough to speak. The only one who told the truth when it mattered. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger when you needed me, but I'm proud of you now. I've left you something small, not to fix what was broken, but to remind you that someone saw you." She left me $10. It wasn't about the money. It was about the acknowledgement, the validation, the legacy of someone who finally stood by the truth. Her funeral had been small, closed to me, per my parents' request, but I didn't need to be there to mourn. I lit a candle in my apartment, played one of her favorite classical pieces, and whispered a quiet thank you. That night, I went live one more time. No script, no makeup, no agenda. Just me, looking into the lens and saying, if they cut you off for telling the truth, let them. If they call you a liar for surviving, keep speaking, because you don't owe anyone your silence. And sometimes, losing a family is how you find your freedom. Epilogue. Optional narration for closing reflection. It's been over a year since I was cut off, and yet I've never felt more whole. I've built a new kind of family. Friends who check in, therapists who listen, strangers who understand. I may never walk back into my childhood home, but I don't need to, because I finally walked out, and I'm never going back.